Alright, example 2 for the chain rule, we have y equals secant cubed of x. What is y prime? In other words, what's the derivative of y? Just remember, what does the derivative mean? It means in its equation that gives you the slope of the tangent line at any point on the original graph. So always try to equate that to its graphical interpretation. So anyways, let's go ahead and follow the steps we learned before. Now, step 1, remember, is to make the derivative easier. When I see an exponent to a trig function, what I like to do is move it all the way out so that I can clearly see that the 3 is on the outside. The chain rule is all about working from the outside in, and you can rewrite it that way even though it's not standard. It helps when you're first taking the derivatives of trig functions. So put that exponent on the outside to make your life easier. This will help us determine the difference between the outside function and the inside function. So which rules are we going to learn? Rules are we going to apply here? Well, first of all, we're going to have the power rule because we have a power here, the 3. We're going to use the trig rule because we have derivative of secant. And certainly we're going to use the chain rule because we have a trig function inside of basically what would be considered a polynomial function. So now we're going to label our components from the outermost to the innermost. Our outside component we will label f, which is that outside exponent that we moved. The innermost function is g, so the secant x is inside of this cubic function. That's the reason why we moved it around at first. Now, what is our basic f of x function for step 4 is going to be x cubed. So basically whatever g is, you're replacing it with x, right? So it's just x cubed, and then the inside, of course, is secant of x. Alright, so what is the derivative of x cubed? It's 3x squared, right? We've done the power rule enough now to where we know that. So step 5, we're finding the derivative of our components. G prime is secant of x times tangent of x. Now, who remembers the formula for chain rule for 2 layers? That's something you absolutely need to know, and in case you forgot, it's f prime of g times g prime. So again, every time there's an x in your f prime equation, you're replacing it with g for the first part of your formula. So let's take a look. There's an x here, right? Instead of putting x here, we're going to put our original g function, which was secant of x. So it will become 3 times secant of x squared. And it'll look just like that, 3 times secant x squared. Obviously the 2 will eventually go right here. That's where we normally put the exponent for trig functions. And then the second part of our chain rule formula, we multiply by the derivative of g, which we just found right here. So we're going to be multiplying by secant of x times tangent of x. And I think the reason why I left the 2 out is because we have a secant squared times secant to the first, basically, right? There's actually technically an exponent of 1 there, and we can add those exponents and it will become secant cubed. So let's simplify. There's that 1 I was talking about. Secant squared times secant x to the first is secant cubed. And then we can take that exponent and move it right here. This will be our final answer. So don't forget to simplify once you apply the chain rule. Okay, in our next example we will look at an exponential function.